Steve, walk us through the filters on Serum.
Great, yeah, the filters on Serum, there's the main filter we have is here on the right, and this filter has a lot of options, including some dual modes that allow you to get multiple filters simultaneously out. The way that it works is, by default, you're not going to hear any filtering unless the filter is enabled and you've selected some sort of sources. So if, for instance, I make an init preset here, you'll notice by default it's saying oscillator A goes to filter, but we need to turn the filter on to hear it.
There you go.
Once it's on, you'll notice, of course, the blue visual there indicating that we're going to hear this. I've tried to make it a little more visual there. For instance, if we only have a disabled oscillator routing, we disable the filter view so that it indicates to you, hey, buddy, this is why you don't hear it. Something's off. So as soon as you have an enabled filter that's going to the filter and the filter's on, you'll get the indication that it's active. And so now we have an active filter.
Nice detail.
Yeah, thank you. So the menu here at the top allows you to select the various filter modes.
Are those Moog type curves that we're looking at in the beginning?
That's right. These MG are the ladder filter or a Moog style filter. And this 6, 12, 18, or 24 is the amount of attenuation per octave. And
how steep the curve is, right?
That's right. So in other words, 1, 2, 3, or 4 pole.
Got it.
And so we have that as well as a standard state variable, low, high, band. And then we also have peaking filter, which is like a EQ curve, right? Like a bell.
Yeah.
And then notch filter as well, which is like a band reject.
Okay.
So all of these filter types, you'll notice the first letter of these, right? L, H, B, P, N. These all get represented in the multi-page here. So it's good to keep in mind those names for when you look at this multi-list. Otherwise, you're looking at a bunch of letters. But once you know that, these make a lot more sense. LH would be low, high, right? Or LB would be low, band.
And these are your dual filters. So show a graphic representation by selecting one so people can see what it means visually.
Right, so I'll select, for instance, LP, which will be low peak, right? So we have a low pass filter and a peaking filter, both simultaneously. And the way that it works is our cutoff knob is going to be controlling that first one, in other words, the low pass, right? Then we have this secondary knob here in the lower middle of this knob cluster, and that is our secondary filter. So you can see that our peaking filter is appearing here as this secondary control. So we could automate this with an LFO, we could automate this with an envelope, or whatever we wanted to do. So we have these two filters that can interact. It's a popular thing to do with sort of neuro and some drum and bass and dubstep, is to have these sort of dual notch filtering going on. So that's
how they get a lot of that movement in the tone.
That's right, that's right. So you can select this NN, which is going to give that to you, notch, notch, right? So now we have these dual notches that we can set the resonance amount on and now automate these two bands individually. It's a good way to simulate format type of stuff. Although we have format filters in here as well under MISC, so you're able to get sort of actual format filters if you so want.
Yeah, those are nice too. I like the way those sound. We also have a drive control on here. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the drive control will work for any of these modes, and the way that the drive works is it's saturation that happens before the filter. So it's sort of like if you think about an input gain stage, and that has the ability to sort of clip the sound or distort the sound. It's not actually a hard clip. It's a transfer function that's going to allow some harmonic saturation to take place. So it's really noticeable on sounds that are lacking upper harmonics. If you just feed a sawtooth through, you may not notice it very much because a sawtooth already has all these harmonics there.
It's already pretty bright, yeah.
That's right. So, but if we had, say, a sine wave going through, it's pretty audible. Even on this video, you'll probably be able to hear it. Right, so you can get that drive going on. We're hearing a little extra because of the output clipping there. Sorry about that. But if we, say, bring this filter up so we're not filtering too much, you can hear that drive is taking place there. So that can be nice to really give the filter an extra sort of analog kind of quality, add a little bit of drive, and that's that. And then we have the FAT control, and the FAT control is pretty similar to the drive control, except it doesn't have any sort of coloration going on. So this is a way that you can just get some kind of gain boost going on in the filter without running the risk, so to speak, of changing the frequency quality.
And then you have a mix control. What is that, sort of a blend between
dry and wet? That's right. So you can kind of, as if you're doing a parallel process with the filter. And it's something that makes it's of value in some places maybe more than others. Flangers, phasers, combs, these types of filters it can be pretty useful on, because if you know phasers, effects and stuff like that, sometimes it's nice to have that wet-dry mix. You might want some of that flanger without it just going to total flange.
Got it.
So it's useful for that. There's a little hidden feature I've added in the 1.02 Serum here, which I may make more visible, which is that you can click on this mix word and it turns to level. And what's happening here is now this knob no longer has a dry component. In other words, when I turn this to 0, we're just going down to silence. So this is sort of just an output volume.
Cool.
And the reason for that is if you had oscillators that are not running through the filter. And if you're, say, for instance, using drive, making the filter get kind of loud, you might want to be able to back that off some.
You can control the blend on that way.
That's right. Blend between the unfiltered and filtered oscillators can happen here, because you may run out of boost here to get the thing up to level. So that's the thinking there. It was requested and I added that. So while we've done that, we've discussed these 3 knobs here: the drive, the fat, the level. And of course, cutoff and resonance people should know from just standard filter stuff. Resonance is slightly unique, and in some of these filter modes, it is also potentially feedback. So it's resonance or feedback.
Is that feedback at the cutoff frequency? Is it feeding it back into the input of the filter?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
that's how resonance works on a filter technically as well, as it's a feedback of sorts. So
Awesome.
It makes sense those go together. So there's cutoff, resonance, and then the last knob here is panning. It says pan, but you can also think of it as stereo, which is what the tooltip shows there. What this control is doing is the pan control is going to provide a cutoff offset. In other words, the left channel might have, say our cutoff is set to 300 hertz. If we apply some of this pan control, the left side might become more like 250 hertz, and the right side might become like 350 hertz.
Oh, got it.
So they're both splitting, and this can give you this nice sort of pseudo stereo or width kind of effect going on, because now your left speaker and right speaker have a different frequency component. So it's a neat way to add width without adding the problems that occur when you start adding delays to try to get that Haas effect stuff, and you start canceling out the low end. So.
And then a typical key tracking button as well, right?
Yeah, we've got a typical key tracking, which is 100%. One thing that's nice about these filter types is that they key track perfectly. So in other words, if you go up an octave, let me turn off that guy.
Sure.
And let me put this back to a saw. I'll do it with a formula because I'm a math guy.
And which we'll get into that editor a little bit later in the videos.
So you can see I'm adding in sort of like this octave and a fifth or something with the filter. I just kind of did that by ear really quick. And you can see that it's going to track. It's following perfectly because I have this key track enabled.
Right.
So it's very musical that way if you want it to be, especially if I crank the resonance and make it so you can hear a pitch.
Nice. So you don't get any dissonance between those pitches as you play different notes, because the key tracking is not equal, right?
Exactly. So it's following perfectly. If you don't want a perfect key tracking, you're able to use this note graph, and you could drag that to the cutoff knob. And then you could scale any depth you want. So let me even turn off this key track if I wanted. Now you'll notice that there'll just be a very slight amount of change.
And you can hear a little bit of the imperfections and where the cutoff is and the pitch that you're playing on the keyboard too.
That's right. Now the resonance is no longer following in a musical one-for-one way, but it's just slightly going up or down, more like a resonance if you had a sitar or something maybe.
Nice.
So that can be cool for its own uses, especially more special effect uses, or like I said, trying to make some sort of ethnic instrument sound, which you can do pretty easily with these comb filters and resonance and stuff. So we have this graph that also lets you sort of see visually what's happening. This is a spectral plot of what's happening. It just runs an impulse through the same filter type and gives us a frequency response, sort of like you see in a spectrum analyzer. It also has a phases mode, which is going to show you the phase response. It's more eye candy than anything, but it's kind of cute. It can be educational to see how different frequencies are getting phase shifted based on where the filter cutoff is.
Very cool. Did you just click on the screen to pull that phase option, or is there?
That's right. That's all you do is just click on the screen and it'll toggle.
Very nice.
Some other sort of exotic filter types in here worth mentioning. Sample and hold allows you to do, basically it's a bit crusher type of a thing. We have sample rate reduction and bit reduction all together. So our cutoff knob here will be sample rate reduction. Let me just get the resonance down there. So you can hear just doing a typical sample rate reduction, and then the resonance knob is going to do our bit crushing. You can see it's breaking apart down to silence.
Breaking apart, yeah.
So This is going to be neat stuff because unlike running just a bit crusher effect, this is a per voice filter, right? So if we play a chord, we could have the different sample rate for each note, and we could modulate each one individually, and so fun stuff can take place using this as a filter. Another one that's become pretty popular that I didn't really foresee when I added it is this reverb filter. Some of the guys in the bass music world especially are really enjoying using this reverb filter to basically modulate the parameters of the reverb, like the cutoff is sort of like your reverb size. And the fact that you can do this per note, say attach it to an envelope or an LFO, and use this, or a macro even, and use this to sort of mutate the sound. It was interesting how much that sort of caught on and become a popular sound. I didn't quite foresee. One of my beta testers said it was going to be a thing, and he was right. So shout out to Francis. That is the filter module, more or less. It's also worth mentioning there is a filter module in the effects section, which gives you these same filter modes, so that if you need a secondary one or if you wanted it after the distortion, this is very easy to do. And you can drag and drop modulators to these knobs as well. Only thing to keep in mind is this is running as an effect, so it isn't per voice anymore, but it's on the actual output.
Right. Which leads us to our next section. We'll be talking about the modulation section next in Serum.